A transmission fluid change on a Mercedes E500 2010. This is the 2009 model year 722.9 transmission, 7G Tronic. This is the W212 platform. The same should apply to all the Mercedes 7-speed transmissions, most rear-wheel drive Mercedes of this era. Now there are a bunch of videos out there on how to change the fluid on a 722.9 transmission. So why did I do this video? But I couldn't find a video that covered the seals. I've worked on the ZF and Ford 6R80 transmissions. Common problems with those are the seals in the valve bodies. For the 722.9, I was searching the internet to see what the common issues are. I came across an article in Gears magazine that mentioned the O-rings on the solenoids commonly go and trigger various problems with burnt out clutches and whatnot. That's good. A couple of O-rings, that's pretty easy to replace. I was really struggling to find information on what O-rings to order. So it'll be quite a long video because it's covering not just changing that oil and filter, also upgrading to a bigger pan and changing those O-rings. 3 options for parts. You can do absolute bare minimum: filter, oil, thermometer. It's a fluid change, filter change, put it all back together. Option 2, filter, oil, replacement bolts, drain plug washer and drain plug riser. Also a scanner, read the transmission temperature from the onboard computer. I find this one works. Option 3, we'll be going through in this video, is we're going to upgrade the older, shallower pan to the steeper pan with more clearance, together with an upgraded filter. Replacement bolts for the valve body assembly. O-rings, replacing O-rings on the solenoids, and some lint 3 pipes for cleaning. Standoff pipe, they say to order a new one. For the later pans, for the 7G Tronic Plus, uses a different height. The older pans use the taller standard. Don't order a green one for your older style pan. It'll set the oil level at the wrong height. This clips into the base of the pan, and so you're pumping fluid up through and in, and this just controls the level, right? It works as your dipstick by draining oil off when there's too much in there. Why do you need to replace these bolts? More importantly, why do you need to buy fancy, expensive ones? The alloy in the transmission is a magnesium alloy, and the compatible bolts with the magnesium alloy are an aluminium alloy bolt. Pretty soft. So these are torque to yield, they will stretch. So Mercedes recommends you replace all of them each time. You'll also need something to pump the transmission fluid in. You'll also need a drain plug adapter. M12 by 1.5 to screw into the pan, plus whatever connector you need to connect to your transmission fluid pump. Now what's recommended is you get a pump, run off a compressor with a valve with an on-off shut-off valve. What I'll try is just clamping mine shut, clamping the tube shut to stop the outflow while I refill this. I'm confident this style pump will take a lot longer. I'm also confident this style pump is going to take up a whole lot less room in my garage for the 99% of the time when it's not being used. Like the amount of fluid you'll need is somewhere between 6 and 9 litres, depending on whether you're just doing a drain or if you're draining the torque converter, etc. So what fluid to use? Okay, there are 2 different fluids used in these transmissions. The red fluid up till 2010 and the blue fluid after 2010. The red fluid, the Mercedes Benz standard, is 236.14. I'll leave a link below to the Mercedes Benz website that lists all the brands that are approved in meeting that standard. This is not one of them. If you're in the US or Europe, you can head straight down the shop and buy that Mercedes Benz approved fluids. They're a lot harder to find here in New Zealand. This Penrite's BMV, it's not an approved one, but it's the one I'm using. It says it meets both the red and blue fluid standards. Personally, I would only use it in place of the red standard. So looking at the specifications, if we take the Fuchs specs as the standard, the blue fluid has a viscosity between 4.4 and 18. This is at 140 degrees Celsius. The Fuchs red fluid has a higher viscosity, 6.4 and 29.6. So the red fluid's higher than the blue. When we look at the Penrite, 6.1 and 29, it's much closer to the red fluid. If you're in New Zealand or Australia, BNT sells the Fuchs fluids, and all trans sell a ZF Lifeguard, a 7.1 that's equivalent to the red and a 7.2 that's equivalent to the blue. Raisins support the vehicle. I've put mine on ramps. There's the transmission pan. So first job is to remove that plastic cover. Some 8mm bolts holding that in. Plenty of access to the pan now with that plastic cover out of the way. This rear cross brace is well out of the way. I know for some other Mercedes this gets in the way. To drain the torque converter, first I'll remove this brace that runs between the exhaust systems. 4 13mm bolts, and that is out of the way. I'll remove this rubber cover over the window and turn the engine over until you find that one. Don't go undoing the big blue bolts. There we go. A 4mm hex key fits in there just nicely. Is that enough leverage to break it free? Sure it is. Let that drain down for a while, then put that drain plug back in. 89 inch-pounds. Drain that transmission fluid. 6mm hex for the drain plug. Note it is red, not blue. The year after this model, 2011, they changed to a blue fluid. There's that raised plastic sleeve inside here, which controls the level when you're filling. We don't need that when we're draining. There we go. While it drains, I'll break loose those bolts holding the pan on. They're Torx external 10, E10. Yeah, but not very tight. We'll cut these cable ties so we can get at the clips. I'll take this one clip out so we can get this cable out of the way. So that red bit slides down. Need to remove this bracket to get at that last bolt. This bracket's held in by E12, not E10, like the pan. So one of those is an E12 and one of them is an E10. Okay, and now I can get access to that last E10. So to minimize the mess, we'll leave some of the bolts partly in at the uphill side and drop the bolts from the downhill side. I've got a catch pan. So you're removing bolts plus these little standoffs. No bolts holding the filter, just the pressure of the O-ring. 10 points if you can do that without spilling a drop. If you're doing a level 3 service, disconnect the plug to the valve body or remove the electrical connector for the valve body. It's behind this plate. We've already undone this bolt holding it here. And we can pull it down and out of the way. And here is the electrical connector. Okay, there's our electrical connector. We'll reach in and pop that out with that one tab. Okay, there it is. We're only removing the silver Torx bolts. These have a rounded shoulder. You're leaving the dark grey bolts with a square shoulder. They are very delicate. Aluminium alloy bolts, because they're going into that magnesium alloy transmission case. So it'd be quite easy to snap the heads off these if you... Okay, so if you can hold this end. Yep, I'll undo these. Try pushing down on this connector.
Something just fell out.
Yeah, I wonder where that went to. Little standoff pipe. There's two O-rings holding it in place up here where the connector goes through the casing.
Feels like there's something holding on this side.
On that side, yeah, there should be a pan on that side that stops it from going
anywhere.
Okay, you might need two hands there. Can you get two hands to it? Is that going to come down?
I'm not sure, there's something on it.
Yeah, there's a bit of a pin on that side. You did it. There's our mechatronics unit, or valve body. The 722.9 transmission, Mercedes 7-speed, was fitted to a whole bunch of different cars from the mid-2000s. The version of this module, see this one's a VGS 3 NAG 2. The plan here is to clear any muck off the bottom of these solenoids and clean off the position sensor over here. Be very careful with this, as well as being expensive to replace. It's also coded to your vehicle. Other thing to consider, what's worse than old oil in your transmission? Dirt. You need somewhere clean where you can work on this. If you don't have somewhere clean, I would recommend you don't drop the valve body. Leave it alone, just do an oil drain and refill and stop there. Use a T40 to break free the little brackets holding these solenoids down. This valve body is not a magnesium alloy, so the bolts are not torque to yield, so you can reuse these ones. That's good. Be careful with the position of these solenoids. You see there's black ones and blue ones. You can't really mix those up because of the way they're slotted. They won't go in the wrong hole. However, the transmission has learned the individual values of these solenoids. So best to put the same one back in the same place. And we can do that by, we'll just turn that and put it back where it came from. Work on them one by one. One concern is anything blocking this little filter on the bottom here. And you can use a magnet to remove any metal shavings off the bottom here. You know, if there's any wear, it's going to produce a little bit of metal. You don't want to put any, blast any brake clean into this. You risk forcing those contaminants into the solenoid and wrecking it. So just a magnet to pull them off the surface. And I'm not getting anything at all. Very fine mesh screen. Okay, see those two metal connectors? Lint-free swabs here. Cleaning off those metal connectors and checking there's nothing down in here. No contaminants or metal or chunks. This one's looking pretty good. I'm doing this as preventative maintenance. If you were opening up a transmission that actually had problems, you'd expect to see more contaminants in here. Also, these connectors on the back here, make sure they're nice and clean. What we're also going to do is replace these O-rings here to maintain a good seal there. Working out what is the correct size O-ring to replace on these solenoids. I can't tell you what Mercedes Benz originally specified. There we go, there's the small one. Inside diameter I'm getting 8.7, and the bigger one we're getting 14.7. It's two big O-rings on the electrical connector, about 31.5. Next measurement we need is the size of the O-ring, the thickness of the rubber, cross-section if you like. First we'll check this zeros properly. Yep, these are a bit deformed, the old ones, so we'll take a few measurements and average them. 1.6. And the second measurement about a 1.4. So we'll call that one a 1.5 millimeter. The bigger O-ring from the solenoid. These ones weren't so squashed. Getting just under 2, and that way just over. Okay, so I think these are 2 millimeters thick, thereabouts. The electrical connector, 2.6 that way, and 3.3 that way. Probably go for 3mm for that one. Doesn't look evenly squashed. But what diameter do we go for? This inside diameter here is 10. Okay, if we were to pick an O-ring that had a 10mm inside diameter, it would only just touch there, right? But how much smaller do you make it? From what I understand on the internet, they say O-rings can generally handle between 1% and 5% stretch. So I'm picking an O-ring that is between 1% and 5% smaller in a diameter than the part that it's going onto. These are the O-rings I'm wanting to replace. The smallest one, 1.5mm. This is the cross section, right? This is how thick it is. Inside diameter of the solenoid, 8.7. Okay, so if we go between 1% stretch and 5% stretch, then we need an O-ring between 8.3 and 8.6mm inside diameter. And then I've written in here what I actually used. So I used an 8.5 inside diameter by 1.5mm cross section. And so on for the others. You can find this entire part, including this weird rubber seal here. I'd recommend you just replace that whole part if you're wanting to order some parts in advance, but do check before they go on, and do check the comments. You might find something useful in there from somebody that knows more about this than I do. Next choice is, what material of O-ring should I use? For automatic transmissions, generally going to be picking between a Viton or a Buna N or nitrile. Both of them can handle oils. Viton probably lasts longer, can handle much hotter temperatures, but nitrile is cheaper, and the nitrile is a little bit more flexible at low temperatures. In a place that goes way below freezing. So how can we tell what type they actually used in this transmission? There was an excellent video by Lorne Tontigo. Hey, you can use specific gravity to tell the difference. The specific gravity of Viton is generally more than 1.8. Nitrile is generally around 1.3. So if I can find a liquid in between these two, that should work. And what do you know? Honey has a specific gravity of 1.4. If I use honey, nitrile should float and Viton should sink. First, let's see what Mercedes Benz used. I've warmed the honey in the microwave for 10 seconds. 60 degrees Celsius. It's runny honey, right? We'll start with the solenoid O-rings. We'll drop them in some honey and see if they sink or swim. But you can see they're slowly rising. They're not staying sunk, so they're lighter than honey. So these might be a nitrile O-ring, but definitely floating. Okay, what about that case connector that's a different color? Well, I don't see much sign of rising there. Let's see if we pull it up. Does it sink? I'm going to say that is sinking. And the case connector O-ring is like a Viton or a FKM, some sort of fluoropolymer. I want to satisfy myself that these O-rings I've bought off AliExpress are actually a fluoropolymer. And we'll take our AliExpress FKM. So we'll do the same with one of these. If it's heavier than the honey, it'll sink down. As I that, it's sunk to the bottom. It's right on the bottom. 1 point to check. You don't want to use fake honey to test for fake O-rings, because what do they do when they want to make sell you honey on the cheap? They add water to it. Water has a specific gravity of 1. That's one of the ways they test for real honey. If you're in North America, Cobra, that sells O-ring kits for the 7.2.9 solenoids. That would be the obvious place to go if you're in the US. For me, shipping was way too much, so I needed to find something closer to home. I went to Seal Innovations, New Zealand and Australia. I'm using a little bit of transmission fluid to help that slide on easier. We'll ease that into the slot. 8 Newton meters or 70 inch-pounds for these bolts. On the electrical connector, I've replaced these top 2 O-rings. Here, there is a third one at the bottom here that has like a square profile. I've left that one alone. Hopefully these two will provide the sealing I need. Pushing back in, I don't want to be applying too much force here. So I'll put some silicone grease on the O-rings and on the receiving surface as well. This shift position sensor has a wee magnet on it. Clean all that gunk off that magnet. And what's that? Piece of metal. Now that's clean, we'll push it back into place. One thing that can go wrong are the speed sensors. There's 3 speed sensors, one there, there, and here. You can buy kits to replace them. It is a hack. They're not designed to unbolt, so you're cutting them out, and you can also send it away to aftermarket places who will replace those for you. Mercedes Benz says if those go bad, replace not just the frame and the solenoids, but often the whole valve body as well. Of course, that only Mercedes can code that computer and these sensors to talk to your vehicle. Mercedes designing these so that only they can replace this. That'll be the death of a lot of these cars. They won't be worth fixing. So my hope is to keep this going well, keep the crap out of the oil, making sure these solenoids are all working fine. That means you're then less likely to burn out clutches. You're less likely to generate a whole lot of waste material going through the transmission, and hopefully that'll prevent problems. So the pan has 2 magnets on it to collect any metallic contaminants. 2 magnets, and we'll reuse these after clearing all of that gunk off. There's certainly gunk on there, but there's no big chunks of metal. That all looks like pretty normal wear and tear to me. 90,000 kilometers on the clock. It's 15 years old. Anyway, we'll get all of that cleared off and we'll drop those into the new pan. Here's the old pan and filter that came out of the car. There's the new pan and filter that I'm going to put in. So why is this an upgrade? Why is the new one better? I don't think it's the increase in volume. It is a little bit deeper, right? The new one is about 55 millimeters deep. The old one about 45. Probably the key difference is this gap here. Here's the intake. That's where your transmission is drawing all the oil from. With the new housing and filter, a lot more clearance because of these higher standoffs in the bottom of the pan. And so that intake has more clearance. You're getting better flow of oil into this filter compared to the old setup. Clean up that gasket surface. A little bit of silicone grease around here to help that connector go in, those O-rings. And I was removing it. This came out last, so I'm going to reinstall it with this one first. Got this pipe to get in, then the connector. How's that looking?
Good.
Good. Does it look like it's going in the hole?
Yeah, it's in the hole.
Holding itself?
Yeah. You torque it because this little yellow thing like pushes itself out so it can go beyond the thing. But
Oh, yeah.
It's in place right now and I screwed it in so it should stay.
Okay. Alright. These are some new bolts going on. So with all those bolts finger tightened, you'll need a little torque wrench for this, just 4 Newton meters or 35 inch-pounds. 90 degrees of rotation. Get yourself a good reference point. And mark these off as you go. Put the filter back in, push that in. I put a little bit of grease on the O-ring, slide it into place, gasket on the pan, and put your riser plug in. That has to go on before you install the pan, plus your magnets. Installing those with the new bolts and reusing your old riser. Pan is back on. Torque it again to just 4 Newton meters or 35 inch-pounds. Doing torque to yield, but this time doing 180 degrees instead of 90. Insert the adapter and pump that fluid in. Now to do the final fill with the engine running. We need to get the car leveled for this. I had to jack up the back. And with the motor running, I'll go through the gears. A little while in each gear, let that oil circulate. I'll plug this one in to get a fluid temperature reading. So we're aiming for 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we'll check the level. And the app's reading 29 degrees as well. From several readings, the infrared thermometer read off the pan was within 1 degree of what the ECU was reading by topped-on top-scan dongle. Once it gets up to temperature, you just let the excess drain off. Drain plug torque is 22 Newton meters, 195 inch-pounds. Give it a road test, make sure it's all happy. Transmission's all back together now. Been for a test drive. Car's running great, shifting smoother than it has. As always, when you're working with one-time use bolts, if you make a mistake or have to redo something, you've got to wait for parts to arrive. Changing the oil and filter, definitely worthwhile. The other steps in this video brings greater risk of stuffing something up, so don't take this as gospel and do read the comments.